Hey guys, welcome back to another day of listening and learning. We are going to continue our segment on the ancient Greek civilization. And today we are going to learn about some philosophers. Yes, do you remember or know what a philosopher is? A philosopher is someone who loves to study knowledge and or wisdom. So we're going to learn about a couple people in ancient Greece that studied philosophy. So today our story is the great thinkers of Greece. Our purpose for listening is to carefully find out who these great thinkers of ancient Greece were and the contributions they gave to the world. So let's get into our story today, the great thinkers of Greece. He was the most famous philosopher who ever lived. His name was Socrates, and he lived in the city-state of Athens over 2,000 years ago. The stories about Socrates describe him as the most down-to-earth fellow you could ever meet. These stories, written by his friends and students, tell us all we know about him. For Socrates never wrote anything about himself. According to these stories, there was no one more clever, no one more loyal to his friends, no one who is willing to poke fun at himself, and no one as glad to share everyday activities with you. But the one thing that made Socrates such a great philosopher was that he kept asking questions about why people did such everyday things. In the stories about Socrates, we hear about him sitting beneath a shady tree or walking with friends, always engaged in curious conversation. In one story, many guests are waiting for him to arrive at the dinner party. The guests and their host, a man named Agathon, are wealthy, well-educated young Athenians who talked about sports, politics, and the latest plays. Some people help run their families' large farms or travel to faraway lands on business trips as merchants. Some are political leaders in Athens. A few are soldiers, and none of them, however, spend their lives like Socrates, just thinking and asking questions to answer other questions. In this story, Socrates is older than the rest of the guests at this party, has almost no money to his name, wears the same outfit day and night, and generally walks about without no shoes. Yet in these and other stories, we hear politicians, landowners, and soldiers speak of him with great affection and respect. So, at the dinner party, one Athenian says, "One day, Socrates and I were passing through the marketplace. I brought a number of items for myself, and knowing Socrates has little money, I offered to buy him whatever he wanted." Socrates said, "One reason for human unhappiness is that people always want more things than they need. When they get those things, they still want more and think the happiest people are the ones with the least number of things. Just look at all the marvelous things in the marketplace that I don't want." So, what do we think a philosopher is? Remember, a philosopher that we're talking about today, his name is great Socrates. His name is Socrates, and what is a philosopher? What does he do all day? They say that all he does is ask questions, get answers to questions for what? More questions. All right, let's get back into our story. Another dinner guest shares a different memory of Socrates. During the war, when we were soldiers together in the icy cold winter, everyone else bundled up in as many clothes as possible. But Socrates gave another man his coat and boots, saying, "You need these more than I do." He marched barefoot, even over the ice, yet he outmarched the rest of us. And when we ran low on food, he still shared his food with others. Yet during the battle, he was the strongest of all of us. And though I received honors for bravery that day, Socrates was the real hero. Yes, I led the charge, but I became surrounded by the enemy soldiers. Just as one of them knocked my sword from my hand, Socrates burst through them, scattering them left and right. Then he glared at them fiercely. Then they ran off. He found me another sword and then said, "If I had known that making ugly faces could drive the enemy away, I could have won the battle for us all. For heaven knows I'm ugly enough for that." As the guests finished this retelling, Socrates himself finally arrives for the party. Agathon, the host, insists, "Sit next to me, Socrates, so I can hear your words of wisdom." Socrates laughs. "I fear you'll go thirsty, Agathon, for I have no wisdom for you to hear. I have only questions, not answers." In all of the stories about Socrates, we read that his method of learning and teaching was to ask others questions like, "How do you know?" and "What do you mean?" For example, someone might say to him, "The way to lead a good life is to give to others," to which Socrates might respond, "How do you know?" By asking these questions, Socrates really wanted to cause people to think about their lives and why they do certain things. Otherwise, he would say, "We will just repeat the same old mistakes everyone else has made. And when we end up doing good things, shouldn't we try to understand why they are good so that we can do more good things?" Somehow, it was always in his company that people had moments of enlightenment. Of course, some people didn't like Socrates. They said he was wasting their time or confusing them by trying to change their minds. Socrates protested, "But I can't change your mind. Only you can do that." Then he would go on his way. So, why does Socrates only have questions? Do you know why he only has questions? Because he is a philosopher. That's what they do. They ask questions to learn about the environment and the people around them. So, do you think philosophers have answers too? We're going to see and find out. Many of Socrates' friends went on to become great leaders of Greece, and many of his students became widely known and respected. One such student was an intelligent young fellow named Plato. Poet, champion athlete, and brave soldier, Plato paid close attention to what Socrates said. Later in life, Plato wrote books reporting those wonderful discussions. But as years passed and Plato became famous himself, he wrote more about his own ideas about the world and less about Socrates. Finally, Plato opened a school near a grove of olive trees called the Grove of Academia. The school became famous as the Academy, a word we still use today for some schools. Here, Plato offered classes in all sorts of subjects, like history, mathematics, music, literature, law, politics, and a whole lot more. He would always ask, "What do we know about these things? How can we be sure we are correct? And how can our knowledge or knowing lead to greater happiness?" By the time Plato taught at the Academy, Athens had changed. It had gone through a long, terrible war. A terrible disease had swept through the city, a disease that today might be able to treat with modern medicine. Without such medicine, many Athenians died from their illnesses. Many of the happy young men and women of Plato's youth did not survive. Life was no longer as easy or happy for him. He then began writing books that asked questions like, wouldn't life be nicer if we could only ... And could it be true to find proof to back up his ideas? Among Plato's students was a young man named Aristotle. Aristotle, too, wanted to understand people and things, but he looked at them in a way more like Socrates than Plato. Aristotle thought, instead of looking for facts to prove what you already think is true, let us start to study the facts and then try to understand what they mean. That simple idea would change the world. Aristotle would become the first great observer. Do you remember what an observer is? Studying things he could see and experiment with, such as plants, animals, human beings, and the stars and planets. Aristotle's idea and classifications, as you heard reinforced earlier, are still used in science today. Aristotle also believed in the importance of having balance in life. He thought doing or having too much of one thing, such as staying up too late, eating too many unhealthy foods, or even studying too much, did not allow time for other things you may need to do as well. So, Aristotle, like the teacher Plato, has opened a school in Athens. Aristotle's students and the books he wrote spread across Greece and beyond, carrying Greek ideas to distant lands. Among Aristotle's students was an astonishing boy who would carry these ideas to the farthest parts of the world. His name is Alexander, who we will learn about in our next read aloud. Great job listening. Now for our comprehension questions. All right? So remember, what is a philosopher? Great. A philosopher is someone who studies life, knowledge, and truth. All right? The next one, who were the three famous philosophers of ancient Greece? You remember the three characters we talked about? The first one was Socrates. Can you say Socrates? Great. The next one was Plato. Can you say Plato? Great. And the last one was Aristotle. Can you say Aristotle? Great. And how were these philosophers or great thinkers connected? From our story, we know that Plato was a student of Socrates, and we know that Aristotle was a student of Plato. Good job. Now for our last one, how are Aristotle's studies important to science today? Well, scientists use Aristotle's studies and classifications of many different types of plants and animals in their studies today. All right, guys, you did a great job answering the questions. So I'm going to say a sentence and you are going to act it out. For example, I like to act sad. Do you cry when you're sad? How do you act when you're sad? Let's act it out. All right. The next one is, I like to run in place. Do you like to run in place? Let me see you. Run it up, run it up, run it up, run it up. Remember marathon? Remember the guy that ran all the way to tell the message? Run it up. What was his name? Run it up, run it up. All right. Now, stop. The next one is, I like to hike up a hill. Can you show me what it's like to hike up a hill? Let me see. I will hike up a hill to see Mount Olympus, right? Go up, hike up, hike up. All right. Now let's wiggle it out, wiggle it out, wiggle it out. Okay. Now let's get back to the last part of our listening and learning lesson today. Remember, we are doing the story, The Great Thinkers of Greece. So our word for today is marvelous. Can you say that word with me? Marvelous. Good job. So just like in our story, just look at all the marvelous things in this marketplace that I don't want. What is our word today? Marvelous. Good job. What does marvelous mean? Marvelous means excellent or wonderful. So let's do an example sentence. My aunt's restaurant has many marvelous dishes to eat. Now it's your turn. You try to think of things that you would describe as marvelous. For example, the sun outside is marvelous. Now let's do an activity together. If what I describe is an example of something you think is marvelous, say, that's marvelous. If what I describe is not an example of something that is marvelous, say, that's not marvelous. So, how about eating a hot fudge sundae? Well, for me, that is marvelous. Yes, I love a fudge sundae. Or how about your first day of school? Is that marvelous? For me, that is the best thing. So that is marvelous. Or how about a new baby sister or brother? Is that marvelous? You tell me. I think that would be marvelous. All right, so until next time, guys, keep thinking because you too can become a philosopher. Remember, a philosopher is one who what? Thinks. All right, till next time, think away. Bye.